to you, the people of South Sudan, to thank you for your support and to wish you well as I prepare to depart the country tomorrow after more than 4 years of service here. I have so much admiration for the people of this country who I have enjoyed working alongside immensely. You are a tough, resilient and remarkably patient lot of people, inspired by your seemingly endless hope as you fight against huge odds to achieve the much brighter future you deserve. And I'll miss this young country, and I wish you well from the bottom of my heart. I've been extremely privileged to support South Sudan to peace. I'm proud of the progress that has been made, including the ceasefire, the peace deal, and the formation of the transitional government and the installation of local leaders in the states. I'm also pleased and encouraged to see that most people who once fled in fear to UN protection of civilian sites have either returned home or are living in newly transitioned displacement camps under the responsibility of the South Sudan, including picking up the pace on constitution-making, transitional justice and economic reform. And there are also courageous decisions that need to be made to unify the soldiers of the different parties. I hope that there is an end to the sporadic but brutal violence that we continue to witness in parts of the country like Jonglei and Warrap, so that communities right across the country have the opportunity to recover and to rebuild their lives. I urge the people and leaders of South Sudan to remain unified and energised to push the peace process forward to fully implement the revitalised agreement and hold elections so communities across the country can finally enjoy true peace and prosperity. When people in years ahead look back on this year, I hope they can say that it was a time when leaders made bold decisions that took unity and peace forward. I want also to pay tribute to my colleagues, people from the UN agencies which have stood by South Sudan over many years, and the almost 20,000 UN keepers who are helping to reduce violence and bringing diverse communities together to reconcile and build peace. UNMISS is a stabilising force that extends well beyond our physical presence, our independent success of our presence. That has started. Over the coming year, there will be a reduction of our military and police peacekeepers by around about 7%. We're also refocusing our efforts to ensure that UNMISS is fit for purpose in the evolving political and security situation. We are redeploying staff and resources to build the capacity of important local institutions like the courts, the justice system and the national police, and prioritising technical support for the security sector reform as well as the election process itself. And not to forget the roads, which the troops of 7 different companies have worked on so people and goods can travel across this vast country. I want to also thank my humanitarian colleagues, international and national, for their efforts to provide life-saving assistance to millions of people who are in need. They are working in remote, difficult and sometimes dangerous conditions to deliver much-needed support to vulnerable communities across South Sudan. I thank them for their courage in risking their own health and well-being to help others. As I prepare to leave, my thoughts and best wishes are with the people of this country who we, as the UN, are here to serve and support in their journey towards lasting peace. I truly wish you a bright and prosperous future. And in finishing, I would like to thank those of you here, the journalists in this room, who work tirelessly to provide communities and with the important information they need to stay safe and to understand and participate in the peace process. You work in a tough environment where criticism is too often silenced rather than listened to and heeded as a cry for change. I know you face difficulties, but please know that your work and efforts matter. Your words have influence to change hearts and minds for the better. So please don't lose heart. And on that note, I want to thank you for being here and move to your questions. Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, David. First of all, thank you for your service in South Sudan. That your term is now coming to an end. Thank you. My name is Wate from BOA. Thank you for your service in South Sudan. That your term is now coming to an end. I have just two questions, especially in regards to reduction in the percentage of the army's military and police peacekeepers in South Sudan. I would like to understand this 7%, what number does it represent? And if you also outlined how many peacekeepers both police and the police having, and perhaps state even why is this reduction? Thank you.
The reduction is very simple. It's as we have moved out of the POC sites and they have transitioned to become to IDP camps under the authority of the government. It means that the troops that we use for that purpose, some of those can be repositioned across the country, but some of them can also be withdrawn. And so it's those peacekeepers and those police that we're looking to reduce in numbers. And in approximate numbers, the number of military peacekeepers here is about 14,500 approximately, and the police, if they're at full strength, are around about 2,100.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dennis Logoni. I think because it's the last time you're leaving South Sudan, I have a lot of questions for you here. For the time you have been as head of UNMIS, what would you say have been your major success and challenges? And then secondly, you have consistently called on the other Tigon to implement all the aspects of peace agreement. What would you tell your successor who is after you? Then would you say you have left South Sudan better than you found it nearly 5 years ago? Over the weekend, you championed for the return of abducted children and women in Greater Jammu region. Are you optimistic that this process will continue? And then lastly, what is the approximate number of the people who have left the UN protection of civilian sites? Thank you so much.
There's a lot of questions there. Can I just say, when I arrived in 2017, it was just a few months after, it was January 2017. It was just a few months after the July 2016 fighting. And 2017 was a pretty terrible year. Hundreds of thousands of people fled the country to Uganda, to the refugee camps there, and to Sudan in particular, from the north, the whole. And I remember going up to the western side of the Nile and Upper Nile. To was pretty grim. As I said in my statement, there has been a peace agreement. The peace agreement is largely held, and the transitional government is in place. Now, if you had asked me, 18 months ago, whether I would have seen, Riek Machar coming into Juba and taking up the role as first vice president, is full of surprises, and sometimes those surprises are very pleasant ones. And today we have a situation where the country is many challenges ahead. I mean, the challenges rely in the increasing amount of violence at a subnational level. And that needs to be addressed. And it's not just the underlying causes of what creates this. And so much of the problems we're seeing at the moment are people, so they pick up a gun, and given that situation. As you mentioned, who were abducted by both sides during the fighting of last year. And there was around 58 women and children who were flown to Pieri, and women and children from Pieri flown to Pibor. And I think, for those, just think how those 58 women in their lives. And so it was a nice, for me, I'm predicting that it will be the first in many exchanges. And once we have those exchanges, then peace can progress. But while people's family are having held by others, it's very, very hard to reconcile when that situation still exists. So for me, a few days before I was about to leave, it was a particularly satisfying, some people might say small, but for those people who were involved, a very, very large change in their lives.
Did you mention about the protection of
The number of people who have left. I don't have the exact figures to hand. I remember that WOW was 28,000. Now it's down to less than 10,000. Bor is between 1,000 and 1,500 people now. It's going down quickly, and we're seeing an outflow of people out of Bentiu as people move home before the rainy season. I don't have the numbers there, but I don't think there's been a count done there for a while. It used to be at 105,000. It's probably at least only 2/3 of that now. So people have started moving back. In part, that's because the situation's a bit better on the ground. We've got a temporary operating base, military are on the ground in Koch, and it's the second largest group of people in the Bentiu IDP camp. And I think what we have to do now is where they go to. If that happens, then I think you'll see as many people are staying put in the IDP camp services, not because of protection issues. And so it's my belief that the challenge is really now for the government and the humanitarian in the IDP camps in their own homes.
Yeah, thank you. Maura Jack from Paris, despite the recent insecurity that's happening along the road.
I'm sure all of you are aware at the moment that there are problems on the road between from Juba down through to Kenya, Nimale area there. But there's also other criminality that's occurring across South Sudan, and unfortunately what they're doing is targeting in many cases humanitarians who are working in very, very remote situations. As I said before, it's to some degree a function of the fact that many people, people are not being paid, military are not being paid. As I said before, nobody condones the use of violence, but it's also important to address the underlying causes of some of that violence as well. And that's also very, very important, and that's about paying the salaries, ensuring that people have jobs and an education as well. It needs running out for this sort of thing. It doesn't run forever, that situation. Just in terms of access, we've had and enjoyed good access to many areas in the last few months, in the last few weeks. That's become more problematic, particularly in WOW and in Yambio. There's a colonel, a Jack in WOW, who seems to think that he is a colonel. He's got more authority than a general, and creates a problem. And these are areas where I was trying to stop us even to do that. So we find it, irritating where we try to work with the government and the military to allow us to get through.
Sorry, I'm going to take you a little bit back and victims of violence in the country. I wanted to know, you talked about a surge. What said in that report? And can you talk about the efforts to promote reconciliation?
As I said, the big change that's happened over the last 4 years is we've gone from political violence, which happened on a very, very big scale. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people leaving the country. Thousands now is a lot more localised violence. And so, as I said, 78% of the violence that's occurring in South Sudan is more local than it is, in a sense, political, between political parties. And it's happening in a relatively small number of PIAMs across the country and counties across the country. I mean, I think close to 80% of it is in 17 out of the 79 counties. So it's relatively localised. But where it is happening, it is creating a lot of havoc, a lot of death. Last year we talked in this room here with you about the situation in Jonglei, the fighting between the Mole, the Dinka and the Nua groups there, and the fact that many of those groups were not just operating alone, that they were operating with support from at a national level. We saw weapons being used that were not usually carried by cattle keepers. The way that the conflict was structured was much more militarised than we'd seen before. There were supplies being brought in to continue and maintain the violence. So there is localised violence around a lot of very local things, but it's sometimes magnified by the fact that others become involved in it. The same thing is happening in Tonj at the moment, and it is between the different clans, the different Dinka clans in the area, but it's also sometimes it's been magnified by others who have become involved. And one of the big deficits of the last few months is the fact that there has been no county commissioners and no governors in place until the middle of last year. Slow movement on the peace process is not without cost. It costs. So if you don't move on things, if you don't move on putting governors and county commissioners in place, and ultimately if you don't have a legislative assembly that can pass legislation and move the constitution along, it will create problems and frustration and anger that will manifest itself in violence. So it's been something I've been saying ever since I've been here. The peace process has to move forward. There must be momentum, otherwise there's going to be more problems. And I think and I believe that some of the intercommunal violence that we're seeing is a direct result of the fact that there was a gap, a vacuum of power at the local level that allowed various groups to try and take advantage of that. So it's important that the peace process moves on and maintains its momentum.
Thank you very much. My name is Nicole. I have two questions. Just on the reduction of forces. I would love to get clarification whether it is a decision of the UN Security Council, and in the light of what happened in Darfur, the UNAMID, the mission in Darfur closed down. But we have seen the consequences of the closure of UNAMID. Even yesterday, about 40 people are killed in Darfur, and the people in Darfur were of the idea that UNAMID should not be closed down because they know the consequence. So, as ANMIS, what does ANMIS learn from what happened in Darfur, the closure of the mission? Now we are talking about the reduction of forces. What do you see will be the consequence of this? That's one. What is your overall assessment of the revitalized peace agreement as we leave the mission tomorrow? Is the peace agreement safe, given the fact that there have been a number of attacks in eastern Equatoria on the number of cantonment sites and all that? Clarification on the status of the peace agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. They're both good questions. I mean, first of all, as I said before, I mean, the Guard are no longer under our authority. So those forces, if you like, that we used for that have now become spare or redundant, if you like. And that goes with the formed police units, the sort of the riot squads, if you like, that we used to use when there was disturbances inside the POCs. So it gives us an ability to be more mobile. So using the forces some of those forces that we pull out of the POCs to be mobile across the country. And it also gives us the ability to be able to reduce the overall numbers in the country too. I think it's really important to show that if there is a peace agreement, and if there is peace, and if violence is reducing, then the UN will also look to change its posture as well. Now, we're not leaving completely, as many of you know. About 3 weeks ago, we had our mandate extended for another 12 months. So we're not going anywhere, but we believe that we are repurposing ourselves or restructuring ourselves to take into account the new situation. So if, for example, we are able to have courts that are functional in the main areas, Wau, Benchu and other places, then people can be protected by their own police who arrest criminals and they come before the courts. It's a much better way of protecting people. My country, I rely not on a peacekeeping force, I rely on the police and the justice system to protect me. That's what South Sudan should be moving towards. So our restructuring, if you like, is around trying to build the capacity, the local capacity of South Sudan to be able to protect its own people, independent of our peacekeepers. So I don't think we're going to see it. You're not going to see a large exodus for the gate, but it's a good signal to send that the situation is getting better. Is the peace agreement safe? Yes, I do believe it is. I've spent a long time talking with South Sudan's leaders. I just spent an hour chatting with the president. Last week I spent nearly 2 hours talking with Dr. Riek Machar. I've spent a lot of time talking with many others. I don't believe there's an appetite to go back to conflict, political conflict. So I believe that the peace agreement is secure. But two things. One is the agreement needs to progress. It can't sit and stagnate. And to move it forward needs courage. And the biggest and most courageous decisions need to be around the unification of the forces. You have to bring the forces together into one South Sudan military army or armed forces. That needs to happen. And that needs courage to do that. Other countries have done it. You look at Uganda in the 1980s and 90s. You look at South Africa. Just about every country in Africa where there was a civil war, and actually well beyond Africa as well, the same pattern had to come. You had to bring those troops together and make them feel like they were functioning under one unified command to one general, to one president, and so on. So I think that there needs to be momentum on the peace on that front, and also there needs to be real work to try and calm down the intercommunal violence, because that can bubble up and spread into other areas as well.
Thank you so much. My name is Elias Nyajwa from the Rio community. Now this is your last time to leave South Sudan. What can you say about accountability in terms of those who are perpetrating issues, those who are killing people around the country, and there's no justice and accountability in the country? This is the main issue. People who are perpetrating, who are committing a lot of crime, are not being accountable. So what can you say about this?
It's a very good question, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, accountability stops impunity. If you're accountable, if you're going to be held to account, then people will be, there'll be less impunity being able to kill people. I was reminded of this the other day, a little while ago. A colleague of mine was up in Benchu, where we had opened up one of the mobile courts, and the mobile courts was in operation, and in the courtroom was a young woman who had been gang raped by four men, and she stood in the court, and they brought these 4 men in, and they were very arrogant, very cocky, because they believed they were immune. Nothing was going to happen to them. And they saw the woman standing there, and they saw the other women who were around willing to testify and be witnesses, and their faces fell. And after 2 days, the next day, when the women are coming in to be witnesses in the next trial, and I believe that the reduction in sexual violence in Bentiu, it's still a problem, I'm not saying it's ended. There's a lot to do with the fact that we've got courts that function and people who are being held accountable. So I agree with your, totally agree with your proposition that that these people need to be held. There's lots of ways we should be able to do that, and I think one of them is the hybrid court. And I think the hybrid court should, in particular, focus on the impunity will continue.
Charles Water from iRadio. I have only one question to you. You talked about the importance for the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement, and one of the concerns that the party has been saying is that there's an arms embargo that was imposed on South Sudan. My question to you is, as you're reading, are you going to talk with the UN Security Council to lift the arms embargo imposed on South Sudan?
No. No, I don't have a meeting with the Security Council. I did meet with the Security Council about a month ago, and some of you will have seen my speech. Then it's a question for the council. It's not going to be an issue for me.
Thank you once again. Mine are not new questions but clarifications. On the reduction of the peacekeeping force, you did say over the coming year you meant 2 military peacekeepers and 2,000 police. Is this 2,000 different from the 14,500? And lastly, my colleague did ask a question, where did the decision for this reduction comes from? Is it the UN Security Council?
As of now, because nothing's changed as of yet. We're looking at probably the reduction in of being in total, but at the moment, and that remains there. So it's possible if anything should happen, it's not completely. It's going to be dependent on what. It's where that's the numbers that's going to. It's not something that's been imposed upon us by the Security Council. We've spoken to the Security Council about it and our plans going forward, and I think from the response there's been no negative response.
I wanted to know, maybe you could tell us, for the past 4 years, what is your regret? And as you'll be getting into that plane, is it tomorrow or when? Yeah, thank you.
That's a I don't look at life and think about regrets so much. But if there was one big regret, I've met some wonderful people here, and despite all of the problems that people face and the struggles that they have, they can still smile and they can still laugh and they can still laugh. I've just got to know and to have great friendships with some fantastic South Sudanese. And if I have a regret, it's that some of those people still haven't got the country that they really deserve. So that would be my biggest regret. Because I've travelled all over this country, much more than anybody here in this room has, in the last little while. I've been to every single one of our 19 bases across the country, and I've been to lots of places where I've sat under trees and I've spoken to people and chatted to them. I've sat in more plastic chairs than I want to remember under trees. And I just think that there's just so much potential. I remember being down in Maridi and sitting under a tree with IO and through some problems. I mean, even the United States with its civil war, its war of independence and then a civil war. Memories I have. I know there's a lot of people.